Hello, it is Throwback Thursday, August 22nd, 2019. Steve Sipress here, and those of you that have been maybe saw my video yesterday or have any connection at all to the world full of sharp entrepreneurs and business owners, affectionately known as Planet Dan, named after Dan Kennedy, our fearless leader, know that the news came and has spread quickly. My phone continues to blow up in my emails and social media, reminiscing and talking to people and trying to process the whole shock and sadness of the news that has come way too soon. That Dan Kennedy, not even 65 years old, is terminally ill. And after fighting various complications and whatever in the hospital, they have now moved him to hospice. And for everyone that knows what hospice is, that's Dan has chosen to make his exit from this world. And in true Dan fashion, he is still prolifically writing, even from hospice. I had an update today on his website, an update to his last message that he posted yesterday. And so here I am standing in front of several bookshelves, many filled with books, courses, binders, and even CDs and DVDs. Remember those days? And cassette tapes from the great Dan Kennedy. Right behind me is a lot of the bunch of the No BS series of books, No BS Business Success. Now I have two copies of some of these because Dan signed one of the copies to me. Every time I saw Dan, I would, bring 10, 20 copies of the books, enough to get a little, groan and eye roll out of him and ask him to sign them so I could get them to my clients and my members of my Dan Kennedy GKIC chapter in Chicago. And of course, Dan gave the old groan, but as people that know Dan know, is a loving groan, because even though he was sitting there signing books and he'd love to be done, what he'd love even more is to get those autographed books into the hands of some present and or future beloved fans. But of course, Dan had to live up to his public persona. It's very tough to break through that and get the little wry smile from him, But he had to be the old gruff, grumpy, harsh professor and go like, "Wow, Sipress, all the bucks." And then, of course, "Come on now, Dan, it's just me and you. And, you love that I purchase hundreds of your books and give them away," and so forth. So we got a whole bunch here. I even got a couple of these uncensored sales strategies that he co-authored with Sydney Biddle Barrows, a good friend of mine that I noticed are out of print. And I believe I've seen them on eBay or Amazon or somewhere for like $100 or $150 a copy. And I got two right here. Maybe one I've got notes scratched in it, but I'll bet the other one is pristine, as they say. Can get the big bucks. Jeremy Daly is here. Good seeing you. But of course, big bucks. We laugh. There are no bucks that can make a difference. Of course, I'm keeping both of those. And I was looking here today to share some other stuff on today's video, and I found it. It's right here in the middle. Is the original copy of Dan's flagship program, the Magnetic Marketing Complete. This one is a little later than the very original that had cassette tapes. This has CDs in it. And then, of course, right next to it, we have the Magnetic Marketing System Toolkit, which is the real pièce de resistance, because this has hundreds of actual letters that Dan's students and clients sent in and gave the rights, and anyone owning this product, including me and my clients, I've used those letters over and over and over to bring in untold millions of dollars and to build many businesses for myself and my clients, and I will continue to do so, and nobody's going to stop me. And then there's some other things here I showed yesterday, some years and years of No BS sales letters, these in the official binders, but then of course it has many more than could fit in the official binders, and then I had all kinds of advanced newsletters. And so here you see No BS
More No BS marketing letters. That whole big binder there. Where is it? Terrible with this camera. There it is. So we got a whole ton of newsletters there. Whole bunch of CDs here. We got a whole bunch more of Dan Kennedy stuff in here. I found my original binder when I first started getting Dan's Look Over My Shoulder. That's this one here. Look Over My Shoulder. And the Copy Confidential, where Dan lets you actually look over his shoulder as he critiques and red lines and crosses out and edits right through actual copywriting projects with his client's permission that he's doing for his clients. Well, this was the original leather binder that I got, and then subscribing to this and later becoming one of the coaches in Dan's Elite Gold Crown program, one of the few coaches, and became distributor of it. I've got binders and binders and binders of those. And those are some right down here. So here we have some luxury newsletters, marketing to the affluent. Here we have a whole, where's this camera? I gotta get the camera straight. There we go. Can you see it here? My beautiful Aunt Michelle would write on these binders. This one is Copy Confidential. So we got years of that stuff and more Dan Kennedy newsletters here and on and on and on. And what I've decided is, normally I will sit out by the pool on a weekend and I will read 3, 4, 5 books. I speed read, and especially when I read sales, advertising, marketing books, of which I've read well over 1,000. I speed read because many of the concepts are very familiar to me, and I can stop and slow down when it's something new or an interesting take on it. But usually I'll just read a bunch of books, and I decided for the foreseeable future I'm going to take out one of these binders and just hang out by my pool and just read through some of the old Dan Kennedy newsletters. And I'm going to find somewhere, I must have an old computer somewhere. If not, I'll have to buy a CD player on eBay or something, because I'm going to re-listen, of course, I have over and over, to the CDs and watch the DVDs, but the CDs I'll listen to, which I have hundreds and hundreds of in boxes somewhere in storage, because I don't even, like I said, I don't even know how to play a CD anymore. But I'm going to listen to those, and even though I will never again talk to Dan or hear his voice talking back to me, which is golden and priceless, and everybody should have had the pleasure and the absolute honor and joy of having that happen as many times as possible, I'm going to be listening to Dan over and over. And that brings me to the lesson of today. And I see a whole bunch of, hey, Doc. Hey, Joe, great seeing you. And Kevin is here from halfway around the world. Thank you, Kevin. Jeremy Danley says, if I hadn't discovered Dan Kennedy's books, I'd probably still be grinding out cold calls on a daily basis. Yeah, that's kind of the subtitle of magnetic marketing. It's never cold call again. It's the cure for having a cold call. Put together a marketing system. It's a cure for a lot of things. I've had a lot of people come to me over the years and say, yeah, I got to put together a sales team. And I got, I'm like, how about you put together a marketing system? Peter Drucker, another great business consultant, is famous, at least in my world, famous for the saying, in the real world, probably a lot of people haven't heard of Peter Drucker, but in the world of sharp entrepreneurs and marketing-minded business owners, people have heard of Peter Drucker, of the 1 Minute Manager. And Peter Drucker famously said, famous to me and my clients, that the aim of marketing is to make selling superfluous. So if you're, not against hiring a sales team, I've done it over the years. I've hired hundreds and hundreds of salespeople, but when I discovered Dan Kennedy and magnetic marketing and all of his materials and courses and books and, the ultimate sales letter, the ultimate marketing plan, all this kind of stuff, how about you put together a marketing system so that does the selling for you, unless you got some really big complex sale, or like in my case, I do not take on clients just because they can stroke me a check, just like Dan, by the way. I've said no to possibly actually, yeah, of course, I've said no to more potential clients than I've said yes, and Dan was always the same way. And that's kind of my lesson today, as Jeremy's on here, by the way, and Chris is here. Great seeing you, my friend. And since Jeremy's on here, I'm going to point out a couple. Dan was a big fan of comedy, as I'm sure you know, Jeremy, and he wrote this Make 'em Laugh. And of course, in true Dan fashion, he couldn't just write a book called Make 'em Laugh. He had to title it Make 'em Laugh and Take Their Money. And so that's Dan's book about comedy. All of his books have Dan's wry humor in them, and all of his talks, of course. Making them believe about the goat testicles doctor. Phenomenal. You just got to check that one out if you haven't. That is, it would be comical if it wasn't outrageous and sad. The ultimate snake oil salesman of all time. The goat testicles doctor. Does it say that on here? Dr. J.R. Brinkley, yeah. How one of America's legendary rogues marketed the goat testicle solution and made millions. Great marketer from about 100 years ago, way before internet and all that. And, you know, behooves you to study all this stuff and implement it. The concepts, the strategies, the tactics, the principles that Dan taught me and so many others are timeless. And they will last forever. I had somebody, Rob Questa, put a comment on my video from yesterday. He said, you know, we just thought Dan would go on forever. And I'm like, yeah, this video, yesterday's video, me getting all choked up and can't even get through these videos and thinking about just digging into the Dan rants where he was ranting and having fun, but he always had a purpose to everything. And if you want to know, by the way, Dan's secret sauce and the method to the madness, go to helpfromsteve.com. Love to get on the phone and talk to you about it, whether you are new to it, never heard of it, just use it a little bit, or extremely advanced. Love to have a conversation and talk about it a little bit. That's part of the genius of Dan. Everything had a purpose, of course. And I forget why I was saying that, but let's see. Jeremy says, my copy of his price strategy book was given to me for free. Okay, it was given to me for free by guess who? Steve Sipress. At a Infusionsoft event in Chicago. Yeah, I think if that's the one when Dan was on his 4-city tour, his nationwide tour with Infusionsoft that he did in 2008, and then again in 2012. And in 2012, I held a bonus session, and I gave everyone a bonus of a free Dan Kennedy book just for showing up. And so, you know, I bought 100 books, and I got a discount. I didn't pay the $20 cover charge. I probably paid between $6 and $12 a piece. So I invested a few $100 or $1,000 and got some people to show up in the room. Another, of course, strategy taught to me by the great Dan Kennedy. Do the math and figure out what your irresistible offer is going to be. I'm looking for the price strategy book. Now, some of these, by the way, I have the original small versions of these books, like this one, No BS Sales Success. And then when Dan redid the new versions, they would get into this larger version, right? Got another row of Dan books right here. So here's some of the originals again. Ruthless Management of People and Profits, Marketing to the Affluent, Wealth Attraction, on and on and on and on. So here is the big lesson. Dan taught so many. Oh, here's some more magnetic marketing CDs and DVDs. You can watch it, you can listen to it, you can read it. I did all of them over and over. Here's one of the newer versions of magnetic marketing with the old magnetic magnet. Those of us that started way back with Planet Dan, we didn't care about any fancy graphics like that. I mean, maybe we did when we first got it. Like, you know, we sent in hundreds or thousands of dollars for a product, and it would come like, you know, Xeroxed, crooked, black and white pages, a 3-ring binder. You know, the whole thing cost like $3 to put together. It looked like a pile of crap, and we were about to send it back, get our money back. I talked to a whole bunch of people that had that reaction just like me. And then, you know, we plopped in a cassette or a CD, and we started reading. And we were like, holy crap, he's only charging
$1,200 for this? And then I made another 6 figures or multiple 6 figures and helped clients bring in millions from it. Like, we didn't care about all that graphics and stuff. Has its place. But that's a lesson right there. Not the lesson of the day, but a lesson for your really advanced people. They don't care about the packaging. That's for prospects, for newbies, for non-believers, for people that are going to be swayed by that crap. But let's take someone, for instance, someone who loves Coca-Cola. Been drinking it for 20 years. They love Coca-Cola. They're one of these people I can't believe, because I don't drink any of that stuff, but I can't believe they go into like a restaurant and they say, I'll have a Coke. And they go, we don't have Coke, Pepsi. Oh, I don't want Pepsi. And if you serve them a Pepsi, they go, this isn't Coke, this is Pepsi. I'm like, what? It's exactly the same to me, but they'll tell you till the ends of the earth it's different. But take that Coke aficionado and put the Coke in a Dixie cup. Just pour it out on the counter and they'll lap it up off the counter. They don't give a crap. It doesn't have to be in a fancy bottle or a fancy anything or whatever. And that's how Dan Kennedy's greatest. That's my memory of Dan Kennedy's products and courses and so forth. I have a whole bunch of these binders that don't have anything on the side, and a lot of these are from attending Dan Kennedy events. Oh, look at that. There's one of the newer magnetic marketing. There's the toolkit of one of the newer versions. Another $1,000 or whatever, or $800 or whatever for the new version, because it might have 5 more letters in it. It reminds me of this. That's what a brilliant marketer Dan was, of course. And that reminds me, I saw something in the news last week, reminiscent of that strategy. It's one of these action movies that the headline was, Marvel or whoever it was has added 4 minutes of new footage to whatever movie it was. And I have a feeling that millions of fans will flock back to the theaters and plop down their $10 or $20 or whatever, and they'll bring in another $100 million by adding 4 minutes. So I don't care if Dan added in 1 new letter to that thing. I'm paying another $1,000 and I'm getting a new thing with 1 more letter. And also, just to make me feel good, to have another Dan Kennedy product on my shelf. Again, I'm breaking up and I can't get through it, but there's a lesson too. Do you have clients? It was said about Dan that one thing he really loved was how when he spoke to an audience that didn't know him, or even an audience that knew or heard of him a little bit and from the introduction of the host or whatever, he always loved the fact that the people that bought his stuff liked him more after they gave him money than they did before he sold them something. There's a lesson there. Always be selling. And I'm definitely one of those. I loved every time I gave Dan money. So, of course, sometimes I bought the same book or the same product twice, didn't even realize, because it was a different sales letter or a different whatever it was. And I was like, hey, wait a minute. I started listening. I'd get the thing home. I'd start listening until I go, sounds, after about half an hour, I'm like, this sounds familiar. When I look around, I go, holy crap, I have the thing now. Dan always had a 1-year, no questions asked guarantee on all his stuff. And of course I would send it back. I'm not going to send it back. I'm not one of those people. Don't be that guy. I can give it to somebody, or what the heck, I can keep it. So I have 2, 3, 4, some stuff. I'm looking at this one. This is from one of the Dan Kennedy events. Oh, the famous Info Summit from 2008 with what's her name? Suzanne Summers, who was a no-show. So Suzanne Summers was the whale, the celebrity that you were going to get to take photos with and meet and hear whatever inane story she was going to tell. Although I hear she's certainly not the ditz that she played on TV on Three's Company. She's funny and intelligent, and I think she did build, now that I think of it, she's an entrepreneur, successful entrepreneur, built a multi-8-figure and 9-figure brand of exercise equipment or whatever. So we were going to hear from her, and then she was a no-show. So there's the binder and all the notes and whatever from that event from 11 years ago. And I got more and more and more and more stuff. I can go on forever, but I'm finally going to look at that. It's another shelf of No BS books. What do we got here? Do we have the price book here? Oh, there it is. No BS Price Strategy. Oh, and look at this. Was this... Oh, who's who at the Super Conference in 2012?
And, you know, I ought to just, this gives me an idea of a whole bunch of old friends to get in touch with. But okay, let's see if there's no BS price strategy. Yes, that is officially, oops, rotate the phone. How about that? That is officially signed by the one and only Dan Kennedy right there. And you can tell, did he take 10 minutes to sign that thing? Or did he say, how many you got there, Sipress? And just scratch out a whole bunch of autographs. And I gave them out to a bunch of people. And, of course, I kept one for myself. I'm no dummy. Jeremy, the one I gave you was signed, hopefully, by Dan. Very cool. You got a little piece of Dan to live forever. Anyway, that was my answer to Rob. He said, you know, we thought Dan would be around forever. And I said, yeah, this is way too soon for all this stuff, but I got to tell you, in my opinion, Dan will be around forever because Dan is going to continue to live on through people like me, that Dan was a tremendous influence and a guide and a teacher to. And then there's the people I have guided, and you've seen people on this video that are commenting and saying, yeah, and my clients and prospects and people who just heard me speak and never even considered becoming a client or anywhere near a prospect, not even a suspect, just someone that heard me, but maybe a light bulb went off, they did something. That's a rippling effect from Dan. And then they might share that with somebody, or, you know, they'll place an ad and somebody down the road 20 years from now will see that ad and go, holy crap, that ad looks like it makes sense, a lot better than the one I have, where I put my name and logo at the top. That's stupid. Let me change that. That comes from Dan also. And of course, Dan be the first one to tell you that a lot of these concepts are timeless and classic, and he was a king of giving attribution, of giving credit where credit is due, and telling you where this came from and who it came from. And one thing I really appreciated most, and I'm going to again when I read back through the newsletters, that Dan subscribed to dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of periodicals. And I always said, like, wow, so I don't have to. Dan was always quoting every kind of trade magazine and this and advertising that and marketing this, and you know, what a student, what a voracious reader, student. I mean, just set the example. And so I'll finally get to my tip. The biggest thing that Dan taught me, let me go through a few here. Melanie is here. Great seeing you. Rick is here. And Jeremy says, holy crap, I was just talking about the Go Testicle doc on my live video yesterday. I'm so sorry I missed it. You know, I can't believe you do it almost the exact same time every day, and I still catch myself missing it because just my personal strategy, my personal take on social media is I do not check into it till the end of my workday. And that's why you see me recording my videos late in the day, especially if you're, I mean, like Kevin, you're so late in the day, it's tomorrow in the Philippines. But other people, if you're on the East Coast, it's already, what is it? Oh, by the big clock on the wall, that means 9:20 here. It's about 12:20 on the East Coast. So thanks everyone for being here. But So I just don't check into social media and I have a tendency I might get sucked into the whole thing. Especially last couple of days I have checked in earlier because I'm reminiscing down memory lane, and as I read all the tributes to Dan from all my friends, each one of them, almost every one of them has a little nugget that reminds me of another reason that Dan meant so much to me. And so Doc says, brother, I think you're one of the greats that knew Dan better than many, and you always talked about him. Yeah, thank you. And Will is here. Great seeing you. And yeah, Doc, thank you for that. Yeah, even if I'd never met Dan, I know other people that I've been reading their stuff on social media, how they never met him, but how much he influenced them, or through a teacher. Maybe they were influenced by Yannick Silver, or Perry Marshall, or James Malinchak, or Frank Kern, or Andy Jenkins, or Ryan Dice, or Russell Brunson, or one of these people, and they know that every word out of their mouth and every thought that ever came into any of those guys' heads all came from Dan Kennedy. And yet, yeah, having spent time with him, having him mean so much. I mean, I built an entire business in Chicago when I was, it was pitched as, you could do this part-time, be a chapter director, or you could do it full-time. And I started part-time. I was still working as a troubleshooting ad consultant with Yellow Pages, but then I turned it into a full-time thing, left the Yellow Pages, and left a pretty heftily well-paying job and all the benefits and all the corporate BS that goes along with it. And I did that full time, and I pretty much, my business, my beautiful wife Michelle, our life, our lifestyle, our business was all based on Dan Kennedy, almost as if it was a Dan Kennedy fan club. Of course, much more than that. So yeah, I cherish all the moments I have with Dan, but I will never forget. Look at that. We've got even a Dan Kennedy book all the way over here on the end with Zero Resistance Selling with Dan S. Kennedy. So I don't know if that's one you have. And so we got Dan stuff all over the place here. So let's get to the point. Dan was great at selling. He taught always be selling, and even his messages from hospice are selling. As I talk to some people, and we jokingly and we lovingly love the fact that he's still making an offer and saying, please come to the next event and blah, blah, blah. Like, way to go, Dan. I'm like, yeah, but, there's no deadline. There's no, but anyway. Dan could have just sold. Dan could have just gone on stage, get a plane, get into town, give a talk, make 6 figures, and go back home, and that's not what Dan was all about. Like I said, he said no. And clients tried to give him 25, 30 grand to join his mastermind groups and for his coaching consulting days. He would say no to people famously all the time. And he was not about the quick buck and the one-time sale. And so everything I teach and everything I live by and everything Dan was all about is all about the long-term relationship with a client. I think subconsciously that really is what attracted me most to Dan. I think I get that from my mom, a school teacher, and my dad, who was in sales and later on owned a business. Like, they were both very long-term thinkers. My mom, I remember, going around town with my mom, and her students, who now own the movie theater, would come up and say, your money's no good here, Mrs. Sipress, and then bring in all the popcorn and whatever. We'd go to a restaurant, and the restaurant owner was a high school student of my mom's. My mom taught English as a second language, so these people would be refugees coming from whatever war-torn area from all over the world without a penny to their name and without speaking a word of English. Their parents would do anything to get them on a boat or whatever and get them over here, and my mom was like their mom. But it wasn't like, oh, I'm teaching a class and then see you. 20, 30 years later, these people were still showing up and calling and coming over, and we would see them, and it was all about the long-term relationship. So I think I saw that in Dan right away. So when I reread Dan's books and his newsletters, it's all about the long-term relationship. That's the biggest lesson from Dan Kennedy. That if you're looking to build a business to last, and hopefully you are, you want to be thinking long-term, you want to treat everyone and let them know, at least subconsciously, if not as often as you can, tell them straight out, that you're in it for the long haul. It's a long-term thing. And of course, I help people in the short term. They become my client, and the next day they're already making more money. But I tell every client, when I accept a client, I consider them part of the family. And I got that from others as well, as I said, but that certainly was a hallmark of Dan Kennedy, which a lot of people would not say. If you ask people what's the biggest lesson from Dan Kennedy, they'd say, oh, it's something about selling. Oh, it's a 3-step letter. Oh, it's it's whatever. I can't even think straight right now, but it's something to do with advertising or selling or marketing or always have an offer or use direct response or blah, blah, blah. Yeah, of course, that's all true. But the biggest thing, and there's a few people on here, and Jeremy, you're one of them, and Chris is on here. I mean, I've known you guys for 10 years or more, and there's other people probably I go back even further with on here, and I expect to go further into the future with all of you. And Marco is here. Great seeing you. Did I miss? All right, I missed a whole bunch of people. I say hello to everybody and everyone watching on the replay. Thank you for being here and indulging me in another trip down Dan Kennedy memory lane. There'll be many of them, maybe not many of these rambling videos that I will subject you guys to, but there'll be many of those days and those moments. I've had a hard time. I'm speaking at an event tomorrow. I'm hosting my own event on Saturday, and I got another event, my 3 times a year All-Star Entrepreneur Mastermind event that I'm putting the finishing touches on. That's coming up in about a month. So I got all this stuff going on and other things, And I've still found that couldn't really get a lot done these last couple of days. I chose instead to just be thinking about Dan and the difference he made in my life and how difference he made in other people's lives. And I think that's the biggest reason and the biggest, greatest thing about Dan Kennedy. I bought a lot of stuff from a lot of people. I'm sure you have too. But I don't have long-term relationships with almost anybody I bought anything from. I mean, I could look at books here, and I could just go, yeah, you know, I saw that book on a shelf and I bought it. And I read it. It was great. Or I went to that event and I saw that speaker. It was great. But Dan Kennedy is someone who, really amazing when you think about it, now that I think about it. He cultivated this gruff exterior. And by the way, where that came from, he told the story that for those that, you know, advanced Dan Kennedy lovers and students know the story of that gruff Dan Kennedy outward persona, purposely crafted in order to cut through the clutter when he was a speaker in the NSA, the National Speaker Association. He said, man, every single speaker is the same. They all have that big smile and that big handshake and how to see you and whatever. Everyone's positive and outgoing and happy. And he said, man, I'm going to be the only grumpy member of the NSA. I'm going to be the only grumpy speaker. And so that's how it came about. Nowadays, you know, there's like Larry Winget, which I did see a couple of the Larry Winget books on here somewhere. If you're not a fan of Larry Winget, you ought to be. He's got a name, I think he calls himself the Bulldog of Personal Development or something. Now I don't know which shelf I saw Larry Winget books, but he's got that gruff. I've met and talked to him a little bit, also a teddy bear, of course. You know. Sorry, Larry, if I'm breaking some news that people don't know, but Larry Winget is not some gruff, I don't give a crap about anybody person. Dan Kennedy wasn't. Nobody's going to get through life and be successful being that way. But you can do that on the outside. And so you see Larry Winget doing it on the outside. I'm trying to look again for some of his books here because they got those great titles, right? Like, Shut Up, You Idiot, It's Your Fault. Here it is. You know, there's Larry Winget. You're broke because you want to be. It's funny. And other Larry Winget books that are around here. And so he cultivates that gruff outer persona, but of course he wouldn't write those books and wouldn't go around speaking if he didn't really care about people. That's how Dan was. And so there are very few gurus, consultants, authors, whatever you want to call, all those names and more apply to Dan Kennedy, right up there with the greatest of all time. There aren't many that were thinking right off the bat decades ago, of the long term. Dan talked about that a lot, that his fellow speakers back in the days when they were on tour, you know, many of them still speaking now, but they don't have what Dan calls a herd of raving fans. That Dan can just say, like, good to me, I got a new product, and boom, out comes the credit card. Until I find out that it's a compendium of 3 previous products, of which I own all of them. I'm like, who knew? That happened when the corporate investors first took over Dan's company. And what a sleazy, ridiculous thing to do. Boy, was Dan pissed about that. They cobbled together 3 old products and put it out as a new thing, and lots of us bought it. There were lots of returns, but again, not going to be that guy. So I paid my couple of grand for 3 products I already had. Dan would never do that. Dan would never do something to make a sale if it was going to cost a long-term relationship. That's the big lesson, folks. Hope you're thinking long-term. Hope you're in it for the long term. You got to think about that with everything you do in your business. Plan everything you do in your business accordingly. That'll help you get through the ups and downs that are inevitable for entrepreneurs. It'll help you get through the tough times when you go speak at an event and there's one person there. I've been there. Hosted an event, 1 person there. Well, I gave her 4 hours of my best stuff one-on-one. Like, why? Like I just said, because it's all about the relationship. She showed up. I'm not going to tell her to go home. And so I've always said that made her one of the smartest people. Like, she got that one-on-one from me for 4 hours for free. Like, wow, nobody gets that. Dan was the same way. All about the long term, folks. Think that way. Kevin says, true, it's noon there. It's noon. Gee, it's later than I thought. And that'll do it, folks. Interesting that Kevin and Melanie are coming up comments right together, because Melanie makes a trip every summer. Gee, I wonder if that means she's there now. No, I think I saw a photo on social media just a couple of days ago that you're home, Melanie, but I know she goes to the Philippines to see family for a couple of months a year, and Kevin is expat living in the Philippines. So anyway, that'll do it for Throwback Thursday. We're going to call it a night. We're going to end the video, but we are not going to end by any stretch of the imagination thinking about, and most of all, taking action on the teachings and the guidance of the brilliant and, yes, caring and loving Dan Kennedy. Thank everyone for being here and watching on the replay, and I will catch you tomorrow. On Foundation Friday, I'll share a foundational business building tip. Undoubtedly, it will be derivative of something I learned from the great Dan Kennedy. Thanks for being here tonight. That'll do it. Thanks everyone for interacting. You made it a little easier, a lot easier than if I was just standing here talking to myself. These times, it's great to be a part of a community, and that's another thing, by the way, that because of that long-term thinking that Dan had, he created a movement, as he said in his parting message. Wasn't just selling stuff. Created a community and a movement. Are you doing that in your business? Everyone can. If you want help doing it, I'll help you do it. Go to helpfromsteve.com. Thanks for all those likes and hearts. Look at that and all whatever's coming across. I love it. Thanks for the shares. A whole bunch of people shared my video yesterday. Got more engagement and more views any other video I've ever done. Had dozens of people requesting to join my Dan Kennedy group on Facebook, the unofficial Dan Kennedy Magnetic Marketing Group. All kinds of activity going on. I love every bit of it. Thank you all, and over and out for tonight. Bye-bye.